as you can tell from my accent, I was born and raised in East Texas. No, of course, actually I grew up in England in a village just north of London. My childhood was fairly normal. I had loving parents, 4 siblings, great friends, and of course lots of soccer. But even with that positive environment, I still managed to make some crazy choices and get myself into all sorts of trouble. Just by a show of hands, did anyone else have a hard time growing up as a kid making good choices? Yeah, it's not easy, right? And by the way, that is my village that I grew up in. That's Stansted in England. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what they're doing, this is Morris dancing. So I will tell you afterwards if you want to see me about that. I moved to California 12 years ago and soon noticed a vast difference from my quaint little village in England. And as I drove around some of the less desirable areas of Orange County, I noticed that these kids really had little or no hope of breaking the cycle that they found themselves in. If you could imagine yourself in the shoes of a kid in Santa Ana, here in Riverside, San Bernardino, you're surrounded by gang and criminal activity, drug and alcohol abuse, sexual and domestic violence. You see little hope of ever breaking that cycle. By a show of hands, who would agree with me that that would be a far harsher place for a kid to grow up in? Yeah. And that's kind of where my passion and the idea of Pure Game was birthed. I've always had a passion for soccer, but it wasn't until I moved to America that I also realized I had a passion for influencing children. And this came from my involvement in club soccer and a couple of short-term mission trips that I took. As I started to see the influence the game could have on these kids' lives, I realized that I had to combine my love of the game of soccer and my passion for influencing the kids to do something positive in the world. And I think this was God tapping me on the shoulder and calling me out. As I started to run the program, I started running it at KidWorks in Santa Ana. And I met a young lad called Robert. Interesting guy. He was a natural-born leader, but with no positive role models. He was leading his friends the wrong way. And so we were out there playing in a parking lot, actually, with these guys. And one day he was really, really disruptive. And I said, okay, Robert, I've had enough. You are now going to sit and watch the rest of this game. And he looked at me and he said, and I said, well, that's the consequence of your actions. You're going to actually have to sit and watch the rest of this game. This conversation went on for about 5 minutes. And so I said to him finally, I said, Robert, if you really want to play, then you're going to have to change your attitude here. You're going to have to start respecting yourself, your teammates, and me. And he kind of looked down and he thought about this for a while. And I think he got to a point where he realized that, hey, if he didn't start to change his actions, he's going to lose and miss out on something that he really enjoyed doing. So he looked at me and said, okay, I'll do it. And so we started playing. And there was a change in him from that moment. And he and I had a special relationship start to form that day. And any time that he would start to step out of line, I'd kind of give him that knowing look, and he would look at me and crack his head and start to turn things around. And it's kids like Robert who typically have a low self-esteem, they have poor confidence, they don't have any role models, so they don't really see any other way of behaving. And they typically come from loving families who really do want the best for them, but they don't see any hope of ever changing this cycle that they find themselves in. And this, I believe, is where Christ interacted with most people, the lost, the lonely, and the hopeless. Christ said, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. He then led by example. He was the light of hope, and I think he remains so to this day. When we look at the people who live in the areas that Pure Game operate, they have this desire for a life of transformation. And I think that we can use the game of soccer and Pure Game to shine Christ's light of hope into the darkest of places. The children that Pure Game work with are orphans, foster care, homeless, and inner city kids. They have some real needs, and I think that equipping them with the tools they need to make better choices in life is certainly one. But surrounding them with Christian role models so they can actually see and understand what living a good life should look like is even more important for these kids. So we actually use the game of soccer to encourage and affirm the kids for who they are and for the gifts they have. And as we develop relationships and build a trust, we can actually start to break down the barriers and open the doors to these kids' lives to then deliver a character education curriculum that's transferable from the soccer field to the home, school, and then into the community. The essence of Pure Game is engaging these kids in an untraditional form of soccer that can be played virtually anywhere. So we've played in gymnasiums, we've played in parking lots, we've played on school playgrounds, and yes, we've even played in the street. And so we're not restricted by grass or space. And so that means we can adapt to our surroundings and bring these kids the important adult interaction that they really do need. The brilliance of Pure Game is in its simplicity. We bring a form of physical activity to these kids who would otherwise not get to enjoy it. So we actually have kids playing Pure Game who have never kicked a soccer ball before in their lives. One of the things that we do with the game of soccer is, in fact, I've lost my way here just a second. When we look at the kids, it's common for these kids to avoid embarrassing situations. They certainly don't like to be laughed at, they don't like to be made fun of, and they don't like to be left out in any way, shape or form. And what we do with Pure Game is we actually change the teams around every 5 minutes. And so in changing the teams around, that actually removes the discomfort that most team sports create that in fact prevent the kids getting involved in team sports in the first place. And so through our interaction with these kids, we can develop a natural environment of acceptance and belonging for these kids. And again, it's something that they don't normally get to experience. One kid I was introduced to from Garden Grove, he regularly experienced alienation. He was an overweight 12-year-old, Joshua. He was at risk of type 2 diabetes, getting involved with the wrong type of people, dropping out of school, certainly not getting any form of physical activity. Well, we work with the schools, and this is one of our recess plans that we run. And so he was there because his teacher said that he had to be there. And so he's on the field, and you can imagine week one, he's really not that bothered about being there. But I was encouraging him and seeing him doing whatever he was doing, just wandering around the soccer field. Well, week two came around, and he was back out there. But this time he was a little bit more involved. So again, that gave me the opportunity to encourage him a little bit more. Well, week three came around, and this is the turning point, I think. He actually jogged to the field. He was first there. And now he was sprinting around, smiling, enjoying himself. It was excellent to see. But what really told me that we'd turned a corner is that his teacher came up to me as we were running the program and said, "What are you doing to Joshua?" And I said, "Nothing, just allowing him to play, encouraging him and laughing with him." And she said, "Well, that's amazing, because he came in this morning full of smiles, happy that it was Wednesday, because that meant soccer day." And for a kid who hated PE, this was an enormous breakthrough for us. So we actually have kids now growing in confidence, making better choices, and believing that they actually do have something to offer this world. We have kids doing things that they never thought possible. And I know it's something as simple as playing a game of soccer, but without those small steps at this age, there's no way we could then introduce them to the big steps that they need to make in life. Take Robert, for instance. His story continued. When we got to the end of his program, we actually said that we told him that he was finishing and we were bringing the younger kids in. And he came up to me and said, "I don't want to stop playing." And I looked at him and said, "Well, Robert, it wouldn't be fair if we didn't introduce this to some of the other kids. And as time and space was limited, we couldn't run any more leagues." So Robert went away a little bit kind of disgruntled. 5 minutes later, he came back up to me and said, "I know, Coach. How about I come up here next week and be your volunteer and your assistant?" I about fell over, seriously. I kind of, knocked me back. I got back on my feet and I looked at him and I said, "Okay, Robert, you know that this is a big responsibility you're going to be taking on here." And he kind of looked at me slyly and just went, "I can handle it." So the next week, he got there 10 minutes early. And I was able to interact with Robert in a way that I'd never interacted with him before. And so he has really turned into one of my best volunteers that I've seen out there. What we do, we partner with organisations who currently work with vulnerable youth. And so we have partnerships running from Aliso Viejo up to Garden Grove right now. And the idea is our program is flexible, so we can run on any day of the week, before or after school. And like I said earlier, we actually have some in-school programs. And very excitingly, I heard yesterday, this was actually confirmed yesterday, after the Barnabas group meeting, I announced that I'd heard about this, but confirmed yesterday, there's a school in Irvine who wants to run our program that's actually got its faith in the Islamic faith. So it's an Islamic school that wants our program in their school, which is amazing. For the church program, we actually run a program that will train their leadership and volunteer teams how they can run this program at their church, making their church a community centre. We can train them how to use it as a community outreach tool. And we've had some success in training churches how to use this as an international missions tool. So I'm very excited about that part of it. We will actually create our own revenue by running recreation leagues. Our recreation leagues will teach them on 3 different levels the basic skills and tactics to play this at the game at the highest level. So we can now enhance the game for a lot of kids who are currently playing the game and enjoy playing the game. Over the 3 years that I've been running Pure Game now, there have been many moments where I felt like throwing in the towel. I would get discouraged and think that what I was doing really wasn't making that much of a difference. But then I'd actually get out onto the field and I'd see the smiling faces of these kids and I'd see them laughing and having as much fun as they do. And I just suddenly think to myself, well, if I was just to affect the life of one kid, then that would be sufficient. And if we look at one of the kids that I think that I had an influence on, Elizabeth was her name. She was a shy little girl from Santa Ana. When it came time to take the field, she actually hid in the crowd a little bit. And so I kind of walked alongside her and pulled her out to the field and laughed with her and joked with her a little bit. And we had some fun. Well, time for game 2 came around and I turned around looking for my shadow and she wasn't there. And I looked up and she was off running around chasing the ball. And over the next 30 minutes I'd catch glimpses of her and she was always laughing, having fun, chasing the ball. She had no clue what she was doing. But she was having fun. And so I'm reminded at those moments just how much of an influence this game can have on people's lives. People often ask me when they see these kids having as much fun as they do, how they can get involved or help. And we've made this part as simple as the game that we actually run with the kids. You can get involved by simply writing an encouraging note to a kid who needs a little bit of hope. I've delivered these letters to kids and their faces light up to know that someone out there is caring enough to write them an encouraging note. Just think back to when you were 10 and think about what you would like to have heard from a caring adult. You can actually come out to some of the games and watch if you want, be a cheerleader. And if you are so inclined, you can join in and kick the ball around with them if you want. For our own younger age group, we're looking for a character education curriculum developed that's story-based. So we introduce these kids at an early age to the language of values. For the older age group, we're looking to design a character education curriculum that's leadership-based. So we're now going to teach them how to lead with all of the information that they've already learned. And then, as part of that leadership group, we're also looking for mentors, because we've actually designed and developed a youth advisory committee. So these committees are formed of the youth within their own community, and they talk about the issues that they face, and then how they can tackle and handle those issues. So we're looking for some mentors to come around and steer these guys through the many pitfalls that could be in their way. For me, there's also a day in the park experience, and this is where we take the kids for a half or full day in the park. And we always need help with logistics and operations for those type of days. For me personally, it gets very scary when I think about taking on what I believe is God's vision for this, for Pure Game, and that's taking on 1 million kids in 10 years around the world. So I could do with a little assistance in guiding and directing me how I can scale this, how I can take this beyond what I'm currently doing just in the Orange County area. So how do I bring it out here to Riverside even? I would like to thank you for your time and attention as I've shared these stories with you. I've really enjoyed my time up here. And through the encouragement and engagement of Pure Game collaborators like yourself, I will seek to be a good steward of what I think is God's vision for this. And as we grow Pure Game together and create more just fantastic stories of children changing and developing into great leaders of tomorrow. Thank you very much.